Hi everyone, I want to talk about monks. I guess almost everyone is pretty much aware that monks don't really have it very well right now in Diablo 3. So they did have a support role for many seasons, being the #1 defensive choice if you need a lot of healing, a lot of defense. And they don't really have any purpose anymore now that they don't have that role anymore. They don't have any group viable build whatsoever, and for pushing, 4 of the 6 leaderboards in solo are Tempest Rush, so there are a lot of issues right now that the monk has. The only good build really is Tempest Rush with Patterns of Justice, and then it has a few variations of that with the other sets. And then there's Uliana, which is kind of decent, but needs some numbers. But overall, I guess Uliana is very well liked, and if it gets buffed a bit, that's gonna be fine. And then there's Raiment. And I want to talk about Raiment specifically because I believe there's a lot of really cool untapped potential here. I don't think we really need to talk much about how bad Raiment is right now. It has been untouched since pretty much forever. It used to be played very long ago with like some dashing strike build, and then it used to have that static charge build that got obliterated with a nerf. And now we have this Crippling wave mangle set that, well, not only is extremely squishy and doesn't really do any damage, but it's also incredibly boring to play in my opinion. So I want to talk about some rework ideas. I believe if Blizzard wants to keep going and keep seasons exciting with changing metas, then Monk and also Witch Doctor are definitely on the menu for the next 1 or 2 seasons. And I think specifically something like Raiment would be a very good target for a Firebird style rework. The main issue that I have with Raiment is that there's basically no real reason to use most of the generators. You use maybe 2 generators if you can afford a toughness loss, but let's say that a rework will make it sufficiently tanky, so you're not really super struggling for survival anymore. So you can easily include Wave the 100 Fist with Assimilation, which is like the #1 generator that will be included for extra DPS in a lot of monk builds just by default. And then you have Crippling Wave Mangle, and that's about it. There are some extremely high-end, high paragon variations where you can get in Convention of Elements, and then you kind of like alternate with your Convention cycle and you deal damage on different element cycles. But this is so far off like some Paragon 8000 stuff, so it's not really a thing. So when you break the build down, you don't really do anything besides standing in the middle, sometimes maybe activating a buff every few seconds, and then just holding left click until everything around you dies, because you do the circular AoE around you. And in the current version of the build, the only excitement really comes from the fact that it's squishy, but obviously it's way too squishy, and whenever it gets a rework, it will probably get quite tanky. And if I imagine a very tanky version of Raiment with the same playstyle, it would be very boring, even if it goes, GR 150 solo easy. So how do we make it interesting? Here's a typical planner of the setup. So it uses Raiment set, it uses the Shenlongs, which are kind of specifically designed to be like a generator item, but they also sometimes see play in some other sets like POJ Tempest Rush or Uliana even. So it's actually nice to have this versatility on them. And well, this set essentially just buffs the hell out of spirit generators and doesn't really do anything interesting otherwise. The dashing strike refund from the 4 pieces is actually kind of decent for the dash monk that you can use for maybe rainbow farming, and also is used in bounties a bit. So that is actually pretty cool. That could probably stay, I believe. Then they have this dashing strike damage on the 6 piece, which is absolutely pointless. I've actually tried making a dashing strike build. I couldn't even do like Torment 15 with it. So yeah, and the rest is just very generic buffs that kind of always lead to Crippling Wave Mangle to be kind of like the meta for every single version here. Now the thing is that Monk actually has a lot of very interesting generators, 4 of them actually, but most of them are basically not used for anything. And it also has a very cool passive that inspired me to actually kind of like bring this idea to the public, and that is the Combination Strike passive. So in case you have never heard of it, I don't blame you, but this one gives you extra damage when you have used a generator recently, and it stacks up for each other generator. It's really terrible because it's 10% additive damage, and even if you have 2 of those generators, you get 20%. But if you have 2 generators, you will have Wave the 100 Fists assimilation, which also gives you, another 50, even 100% or even more additive damage. So you'd never get the idea to actually take this passive, because you're so much struggling for survival that you have to take other passives. And then there's better DPS passives like Alacrity and Seize the Initiative here. So first of all, I would buff the hell out of this passive. I would make the duration longer, and I would make it give more bonuses, something like also attack speed and maybe also damage reduction, so that you're kind of incentivized, or at least you can choose to include more different generators, or even have the option to go for multiple generators when you play another build, so that you can kind of like do the combo and then do your burst with some other nuke, maybe on some Uliana build even, or maybe on whatever comes for potential Sunboku rework or potential inner rework, a Lashing Telekick build or something like that. Who knows? But I think this passive needs a huge buff and also needs a longer duration, just to kind of like be more viable, so they can kind of do those combos and kind of like feel like a monk kicking and punching in all directions. And then we need a reason to use the different generators as well. Now what I like to see on the set is not just some generic damage buff, but actually some special effects that you can trigger from each of those generators, and that kind of like incentivize you to actually use combos. So you want to use that generator and then the other generator to kind of produce a unique effect. What it could be, there are 1,000 different variants, but just some ideas basically. How about a set that gives you kind of like a generic damage buff for all of your generators after using each generator once, and then gives you a long duration on that buff, let's say 20 seconds. So you don't have to press all of your buttons constantly, so you can kind of like do the combo of all 4 generators once, and then you're kind of like set for a while. But on top of that, it would also give you a special effect for the 2 most recent generators that you have used. So for example, Crippling Wave is like some typical like AoE ability, and it actually goes even larger with Tsunami. And then you have Deadly Reach, which has like this long range attack where you hit like attack in a line. And then you have like Wave the 100 Fists, which is like really fast punching. And then there's Fist of Thunder, which has like this impactful, boom. So this is what the different generators do baseline. So now you would want to get like all your buffs up, for example, do all 4 combos once. And then you can decide, okay, do I attack with this one or do I attack with that one to deal more damage, maybe towards a single target, or more damage towards a large AoE, or maybe something in between. And since all of those generators already have some kind of like natural predisposition about what they do, I would give some buff that is active from both the last used generator and the one you're currently using. So for example, when you attack with Crippling Wave, you get a buff that increases your area of effect of all your attacks by, let's say, 100%. So that this radius of Crippling Wave is actually really large, like similar to the Tsunami rune. And then you could have Deadly Reach, for example, that maybe duplicates or echoes your area of effect or your attack somewhere like in the line in front of you, like once or twice. So that you do this Deadly Reach and then you do the Crippling Wave combo, and suddenly you get both of those effects where you have this large AoE and you have basically a second large AoE maybe somewhere in front of you, because you are casting those 2 in succession. And then with Fist of Thunder and with Wave the 100 Fists, I would give a damage buff and an attack speed buff respectively. But again, you can have only 2 of those different effects active at a time, so that when you do the Crippling Wave and Fist of Thunder combo, you have first of all the big AoE from the Crippling Wave, and you have the Fist of Thunder giving you, let's say, a 30% damage buff. So now you have to choose, do you do the Deadly Reach and the Crippling Wave combo for the double huge AoE in case you want to decimate some big trash bag, for example, or do you do the Crippling Wave plus Fist of Thunder combo so that you have this only 1 AoE, but it's 30% stronger. The good part is you can kind of like swap on the fly what you need to do and how you want to do it and when you want to do it, so that whenever you run into a new situation, fighting some big trash pack or fighting the boss or fighting some elites, you can always kind of like swap, just use another generator and activate that effect, and then go back to whatever main skill you want to use in that situation. And similar to the Fist of Thunder, I would give Wave the 100 Fists some, let's say 30% attack speed buff, so that when you combine those two, you don't get any of these like, you know, echo effects or the big AoE, but you have like, you know, very focused high attack speed, high damage punching for single targets, so that you can, you know, do the combo between Fist of Thunder and Wave of the 100 Fists to just decimate the boss. So I hope I got it across in a way that I intended. I know that is kind of hard to show something that doesn't exist, but the basic idea is that you basically just stack your normal buffs from punching with all your generators once in a while, and then you can decide to do 2 special effects from one generator combo that you do. So you do it one time, let's say Crippling Wave, and then you keep punching with the other one as long as you want to kind of like get those 2 runes at the same time. And whenever you want to swap, because most of the trash has died, you don't want this big AoE anymore, all you do is like do one combo with this other skill, and then you keep punching with the other one again. I think it would be very cool to kind of like have this swapping ability on the fly to kind of like completely change the playstyle, completely change the way you deal damage, and it would make the set really, you know, really focused on those generators that the monk has, which all are really cool. Now the thing is, we only have 6 skill slots in Diablo 3, so what would be the last 2 skills to fill? I think what definitely needs to stay is Dashing Strike, so I probably wouldn't even touch the 4-piece, aside from maybe adding some damage reduction, and just leave it as it is. I think that's alright. Maybe there could be a bit more help, so you can actually dash around much more easily when you have Shenlongs active, because dashing actually is a huge damage loss when you do that, so it's kind of hard to go fast and deal good damage in like a farming scenario, because you want to dash, and maybe there could be some maybe lower cost, or maybe some other kind of like refund ability, or maybe some reduced cost stacking from punching a lot, or maybe something like that, so that the more you use your generators, the more the cost goes down for a little while, so that this Dashing Strike ability doesn't get abused too much by other builds where you farm bounties with, you know, a POJ build or a Wave of Light build. And then the last skill could be pretty much anything. I probably wouldn't even set any specific thing, kind of like a Joker skill here. I think also what could be very interesting if each of those generators would kind of like trigger a certain effect, so that maybe if there's like another version of that set, apart from the one I just described, maybe instead of doing these combos, so you combine 2 generators for like a special effect, maybe they just trigger a spell when you use them. That could also be an option, so that, for example, your Wave the 100 Fists triggers, like let's say a 1 second Serenity with like a 2 second cooldown, or your Crippling Wave triggers an Inner Sanctuary, or your with Fist of Thunder triggers a Cyclone Strike, or maybe some funny stuff like that, where you kind of like combine all these different generators, and then this can do that, this can do that, and that could also be quite funny. Obviously, there could also be a lot of new effects that they do, so maybe the Fist of Thunder gives you like some big stun effect, or the Wave of the 100 Fists gives you some extra attack speed for the next while, or maybe the Crippling Wave actually sends out some large AoE pulses over time, even when you stop attacking. I don't know, there could be 1,000 things, just some ideas. Now there are 2 main issues arising from such a setup or such a scenario that I just described. And one is that you can only stack damage for only 1 element usually, and also only 1 generator. So you would kind of like emerge with 1 more dominant generator, and I really want to avoid that. So I would give Shenlongs and like each of those fists essentially an extra affix that is similar to what Stone of Jordan does essentially, where the damage bonus for all of your generators is like added up and equalized. So when you have 50% Crippling Wave damage here, it also adds to Deadly Reach and Wave the 100 Fists and Fist of Thunder. And then on the other Shenlong Fist, you could have the same thing happening for elemental bonuses. Maybe exactly similar to Stone of Jordan, or very similar, where it only counts for your generators though. Another option to go around this, and also to prevent the Wave the 100 Fists assimilation to become extremely dominant as a rune, is to just make these bonuses here additive, so that instead of multiplicative bonuses, they could just be additive bonuses. That would also solve this whole issue of, you know, rolling these stats on your gear. And maybe make it some kind of like additive and elemental, or like swap it all to a certain element perhaps, so every attack deals lightning damage or something like this. Even though it doesn't make much sense with the rune you're choosing, if the set specifically says something like this, you could also go around the convention of elements problem here. Because I believe this is like the second huge issue with a rework in this direction, that you would probably have to play convention of elements and then kind of like have, you know, this extremely crazy convention of elements cycle, which could be interesting, but I think for most people would be way too hard and way too much upkeep and way too frustrating. So I would rather go around that. The second option to go around convention of elements is to just make 3 other mandatory rings. So there is Band of Root Chambers, for example, which the monk has, which is like a spirit focused ring. So in the case of a rework, this could also be buffed with some other special effects that are like required. And then there could be, I don't know, some other new 1 or 2 rings, I guess, that you could fill up these other ring slots to kind of like force people to not run convention of elements. But I think making it kind of like the same element or something similar to that would probably be the best idea here. And that's about it for my rework idea for the Raiment monk. I really wanted to take some extra time for this one, and I thought about what to do and how to do it and kind of like how to avoid the problems that could arise from such a rework. But I believe that something like this would be extremely unique, just the way that you could combine different effects or could trigger specific effects when you want them with special abilities on the fly. And I would really want to avoid that you have like this one dominant attack where you only spam Crippling Wave all the time and only use the other generators as kind of like a buff that you activate, you know, once every half minute, and then you forget about them. So I want to make sure that you use every single one of those in the right situation for them. Obviously, there are probably a lot more ideas out there, so let me know what you have thought about perhaps, or what else you would like to see reworked or buffed next. I believe in season 24 we're going to see a lot of balance adjustments anyway, but there are definitely some other like Firebird style reworks that we hopefully see in the future, and I think this is one of them, and I just wanted to share this here and see what comes out of it maybe. So let me know what you think about this, even if you don't play a lot of Monk. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.